So if you want to start live looping, you don't need to spend $5,000, not even half of it. And in this video, I'll show you 3 setups in 3 different price ranges, from a simple rig you can take anywhere to a full multi-instrument setup controlled by Ableton Live. And by the end, you'll know exactly which one makes sense for you right now. So let's start. For setup 1, let me actually take you outside, because this flexibility is kind of the whole idea behind it. So let's go. This setup is all about one piece of gear, a dedicated looper pedal. You plug in your instruments, hit record, play a phrase, hit record again, and then it loops until you stop the loop. That's the whole idea behind this. I used this older Boss RC30, but nowadays there are many options you can choose from. For example, maybe an RC5. It really depends on your needs, for example, how many inputs you need. And you can connect almost all your gear. Mostly you have 1/4 inch, maybe an XLR input, and then you can plug in maybe a guitar, a microphone, or a keyboard. For example, maybe start just with an MPK Mini Play and use the internal sounds of it. What I'd add is an external effects pedal, for example a reverb. Sometimes the loopers or the keyboards have internal effects, but they are not that good. You could go, for example, with a JHS reverb pedal. It's under $100, very nice quality. Yeah, but there are many options, so choose the sound you like. And if you add up the price, maybe for an effects pedal and a looper, you're under $300. Yeah, you need an instrument, but you most likely have one. If not, something like the MPK Mini Play is around $100, and then you're good to play. The best part about this is that you have no software, no real setup. You have the looper, maybe a pedal, an instrument, just plug everything in and play. So on the technical side, it's really simple and really easy. But there's also a very hard part about it, and that is the timing you need. It has to be rock solid. There is no quantization, no grid, no tempo you can log onto. And that is why you have to practice really hard to get your loops right. Because if the first loop is slightly off, all other loops are too, because you stack them on top of each other and cannot control them individually. That is by no means a reason to avoid this technique. I mean, Ed Sheeran has become a world-class artist just by looping this style. But you have to practice a lot to get your timing right. Beyond that, you're working with audio only. No Midi, no syncing. If you want that, let's look at setup 2. Setup 2 is actually completely different. So let me explain what that means. You're now working with a computer, an audio interface, a Midi controller, and Ableton Live. More parts, but also a completely different level of flexibility and control. So a very different approach on how you perform. I run this on a Mac Mini, but every stable laptop or desktop is just fine. Mac, Windows, doesn't really matter. Just make sure it's stable hardware-wise. For the audio interface, I use an Audient ID14 MK2, but just a Focusrite Scarlett at around $150 does the job just fine. As the MIDI controller, I personally really like this RK MPK Mini 4 with its knobs, transport controls and pads to control Ableton Live, which is the brain or the engine of the setup. And if you don't want to buy the full version of Ableton right away, just go with the light version that comes with a lot of interfaces or MIDI controllers. That's absolutely enough to get started. Looking at plugins, Ableton comes with a lot of nice stock plugins. And there are actually very many excellent cheap plugins that you can go with. Vital, Spitfire Labs, or UHE's Tyrrell N6 all sound amazing. I actually made a separate video covering the best free plugins for live use, going through every category: drums, bass, guitar, piano, synth, etc. I'll link that in the description. So what is the advantage of this setup compared to setup 1? With a hardware looper, you stack each loop on top of each other. In this setup, you have Ableton and you have the clips in Ableton Session View that you can start and stop without touching the other clips and the other loops. You can add top-tier studio-grade effects, adjust the levels on the fly, and the for me most important thing is that you have a set tempo where everything is synced to. But there is one risk that we need to talk about, and that is a real risk because you're dependent on your laptop not to crash. So make sure you have everything backed up, use just stable drivers, and know your limits when you use CPU-heavy plugins. So what's the estimated price of this setup? If you're starting from scratch and don't have anything, you should plan around $1,000. But if you already own a computer or a laptop, it gets significantly cheaper. Just a MIDI controller and an interface costs you around maybe $300. So, setup 3 actually starts where setup 2 left off. Same Mac Mini, same interface, and even the MPK Mini is the same. But we added some more instruments and another controller. The first big difference is this Yamaha YC88. It's an 88-key stage piano, and it connects to the Mac Mini and Ableton via USB for controlling plugins and audio to use the internal sounds of the Yamaha. And I also have a Sequential Pro 3 in the mix, a synth mainly used for basses and lead sounds, for the sounds I don't want to replace with plugins. Everything polyphonic in the synth territory mainly comes from Ableton, sometimes from the YC88, so the Pro 3 fills a very specific role. And then there's the AK MPK Mini 4 still in the setup. I use it to trigger drum or percussion plugins from the pads and occasionally play also different sounds. So it fills a very different role than in setup 2. The MPK Mini 4 works completely fine as a DAW controller in setup 2. But if you add more instruments into the mix, it gets more complex, and then you don't want to shift pad and go through menus to shift the functions for arming tracks or recording clips. And that is where the APC Mini takes control over my DAW. It gives you an 8x8 grid, so 64 clips directly accessible. You can start and stop clips, you can arm tracks, you can start complete rows of clips, and it gives you a very good overview of what is happening in Ableton, even if you can't look at the monitor. So let's talk about the price. And to be honest, I don't want and I can't give you a concrete number for the setup because it's very dependent on the instruments you have or you want to use. For example, the YC88 in the Pro 3 cost almost $6,000, but maybe you have a stage piano or you go with a more cheap version, the price decreases massively. And you also could skip the hardware synthesizer completely or replace it with a Novation bass station or a Moog Messenger. And suddenly it's way cheaper. The real point is, if you already own instruments, a synth, a stage piano, a keyboard, just add it to setup 2 by almost no costs. You could buy the APC Mini. It costs around $100 and then you're good to go. So which one should you go for? Honestly, it depends on how you want to play. Setup 1 is not just a beginner thing. I played complete gigs with it, and in some ways it's way more complex than setup 2 because you're very dependent on your own tempo, you don't have a click, and it's just you and your timing. Setup 2 gives you more structure and more control, and setup 3 is actually setup 2 just with more stuff around it. So pick the one that fits how you think about music. That's really it. All the gear I mentioned is linked in the description. So if you happen to pick something up through there, it really supports the channel at no extra cost to you. I'd really appreciate that. And if you're already on one of these setups and have questions, drop them in the comments. I read and answer everything. If you like to see setup 3 in action, just check out this performance right here. So thanks for watching. See you in the next one and make more music. Bye.